Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah. We're happy that you're here. We hope that you will subscribe before you go, and we're excited to do an extension on last week's episode and share some more news and tips about firearms and all that fun stuff. Listen up.
This summer, whether you're at the range or in the field, WSI Sports' Hypertech bamboo tanks, tees, and leggings will have you covered. Visit WSISports.com and use Leah's affiliate code, LLCO10, for 10% off your purchase. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI is bringing back pride in American-made clothing. Again, that code is LLCO10 for 10% off your order at WSISports.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Mac Outdoors podcast, where a dynamic mother-daughter duo share their adventures, tips, and advice. I am Mia, and I'll be accompanied by the one and only daughter, Leah. It is time to get to outdoors, hunt, shoot, and spend time with family and friends. Let's get this show on the road.
Hey guys, welcome back to another week with Mia and Leah. Last week we talked about shooting with college students and teaching them and stuff that I've been doing up here at college. And this week we just wanted to share a little more about it and some other views on the whole gun control and gun safety that's going on in the media right now.
Yep. So what have you been seeing, Leah? We actually here locally, I will only touch on it briefly because it's still an investigation that's ongoing, but we had a little store that was broken into and there was a murder. The shop owner was shot and killed, and the murderer is still at large. So again, guns in the news. What kind of stuff have you been seeing in the news?
Well, since I know I've discussed before, since I'm a journalism student, I really keep up with the news a lot more than in previous years. I read from all different sources. Local news, I still follow news in Colorado, follow the worldly news, but an interesting thing I saw just last night from CNN was a report on a teacher in California that was teaching, I assume, some sort of firearms safety. It wasn't specific in the article why he had a firearm out. This teacher was a police officer, from what I gathered from what they wrote, and discharged the firearm into the ceiling, and a piece of debris or shrapnel hit a student, and it was nothing fatal or anything, but it was just another story of supporting the other side of the argument.
Yeah, and the other side of the argument would be that guns are bad.
Yeah, guns are bad, shouldn't be in classrooms, and it supports, I think, the big thing with police officers right now is that people don't trust them, especially with the Florida shooting, which I have some other news about that as well, and how they're trained professionals and yet this still happens.
Yeah.
So
the trained professional, he was in firearm safety. It makes me think so many things because it sounds like the article was a little vague, and something that you and I learned this week with you learning in your classes is that somebody can interview you and tell your story, but they're going to skew it to fit their agenda or whatever motivates them. And so this story must have been skewed from what it sounds like the lack of information they're including in there. It's skewed to be against guns in schools, right?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Did they didn't say what kind of training the teacher had, just that the teacher used to be a police officer?
Yeah, they just mentioned that he was involved with the police department there and was a teacher, and didn't really say like if he was an active police officer still or if he was. It didn't mention a lot. There was a lot of, not a lot of sense to it all, but
yeah, and that leads me to think like, okay, I worked for the police department. Does that mean that they worked in the mailroom putting stamps on the letters? That's really vague and really cloudy. Like that doesn't say that was a retired officer who had training in safety, because as you and I know, if you're demonstrating safety, you keep your hand off the trigger and out of the trigger guard, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
whoever it was didn't have proper safety rules. I guess it was in a building, there's always that question, what is the safe direction? Because you're going to damage something if the gun discharges. But so it was in a relatively safe direction. Thank God it didn't hit a student. There's just a lot of questions that come to mind with that. And I also wonder, like, what was this person attempting to teach the kids? Like, that the gun was
Exactly.
safe or that the gun was bad?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting
Yeah.
read, and I wanted to know the backstory more of why he was there in the first place, if he was actually a teacher or if they were just doing a demonstration or something to that effect. So
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah, and this is something, as readers or news viewers, you have to stop and question, like, think the whole story through before you jump to a conclusion. Because I know I have family, you know, that we have family that they get all emotional and tied up in these opinions because they just see this story. Like, there is a police officer in school that just discharged his gun. Guns are bad. That's what they take away from a message like this. So we really have to stop and start asking questions. And in school, Leah is really learning this, and which is why she reads both sides of the media, because it gives her a more rounded view. So as listeners, we hope that you will find additional sources for news and learn the whole story, because a lot of times stories just, to me, they make you have even more questions.
yeah, it really does, especially with something so vague and from someone who already doesn't support the topic. I mean, good journalism is reporting the whole story, even if it isn't your view, just like reporting on the walkouts. Maybe you don't support it, but you better be putting all the information in there.
Yeah, put the whole story down there, which leads to another, you said about photo evidence, and that, you know, that's another topic in the news. Anytime there is a mass shooting or some kind of tragedy, the news jumps all over it before they even have the whole story, and they're reporting things traditionally based on emotion because they want views. That's what they really want, is the reaction from it. So you talked about this photo evidence. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so with the Florida shooting, they recently just found video evidence of the police just standing outside the school while this other kid was shooting up all the students in that school. So that's another, tick on the police officers of why people aren't going to support them or trust them anymore is, yeah, there was an active shooter, but they weren't doing procedure. I know standing outside a building isn't part of their procedure.
Right.
But that also brings up a lot of questions. Why were they just standing there? Why they're wanting us to rely on police officers to handle a school shooting, but yet look what this police officer did. He basically let it happen.
Yeah, stood there and waited until the gunfire stopped. Is that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically.
that's kind of what I understood, but now there's actual photo evidence, where before it was just mentioned that that was the
Right.
case. Okay, yeah. And that makes me think of, you know, as the media is trying to push this agenda of taking away guns, it actually, hearing about this police officer standing there outside waiting, why would I want to not have my own guns, at least at home, and protect myself rather than wait for a police officer to come and save me?
Exactly. That's how I even feel with at school, at campus, here at college. They don't want us to have firearms. They don't want us to protect ourselves in any way, but they're like, am I next? Well, how are you going to save yourself if that happened? Like, I feel like it's just asking for someone to come do something. Like, you're against all of this, and I know that the police are going to take roughly this long, so I can do this much damage in this amount of time.
Yeah.
So, and like we've discussed, that no one's going to be a hero and, pull out a firearm and handle the situation, but I've always said I feel really unsafe at school. I always look for a way out, even in every class when I go.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you should have to do that.
Yeah.
And I think the only way I would be safe is if I could protect myself. And I really wish this school would have campus carry. I know KU has firearms on campus, and their crime rate is down 12%.
Wow, that's really good. That's a very good question, because as you know, you don't see that kind of stuff in the news. You don't see the reports of what good impacts are happening. Like, just giving people that option to be able to carry is reducing the crime rate.
Exactly.
And how do you think we could spread the message more? I mean, obviously we're doing a podcast and stuff like that, but how could our listeners help spread the word that there are ways to improve the situation? Because quite honestly, I don't know if you've read my website lately, but I've really been having a struggle because there is a lot of bad stuff happening, and there are people who are wanting to take away guns. And I know they say not all guns, but actually, honestly, in the underlying message, they do mean all guns.
Yeah.
They might just be after one type right now, but down the road, it would eventually be all guns, because the definitions encompass more than just one gun. So I've been kind of trying to figure out how we can spread a better message to support just safety and respect and responsibility and morals, and how can we depend on one another?
I think it's a really good question, especially with people my age. I don't think there's one exact thing you can do. I think sharing this message of just a typical college kid and how they feel and what they've experienced and what they're doing, I don't think walking and standing outside for 17 minutes does anything for either side of the cause. I don't think going and protesting at the government is doing anything for your cause. I think you should be educated, like we've said so many times on so many different topics. Education is key, rather, both sides or the other side. With my journalism, I read both sides of the media. I read CNN, I read Fox News. I get all the information from every news source so I can be fully educated on what's been going on. And, you read the protester side and you read someone that's not for it. Just like this walkout we had yesterday, I listened to all those kids of why they're out there, why they are supporting it, and then some of my friends who aren't for it and why they're not out there and why they think it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. And from some of the people that you ran into that were for the walkout, what did they think they were representing by being out there?
They were a lot of them were like, well, I just want to support the cause of no gun violence. They want gun control. They want to keep gun-free zones. They basically said they were out there because they don't want to see their friends hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes you think, well, why can't you protect yourself on campus? Like, who's protecting them right now standing outside? No one. There's not a single person. Anyone could have walked on the campus and shot all these kids protesting, and what would that have done for anyone? Nothing.
Nothing. Right.
So it's just really interesting to me on how they think they'll feel safer when, just like I mentioned with KU, they are allowed to have guns on campus, and there has been no gun violence or crimes. That's down 13%.
That's awesome.
So with all these gun-free zones at schools, and look how much violence there is, and how is that so hard to see and understand? They only look at all the negatives and not the positives of these schools. I'm sure it's the same in New Mexico. The college there they can carry firearms. They have shooting teams. They have all this stuff. I guarantee their crime rate isn't as high, but
right.
Everyone wants to.
And speaking of New Mexico, as you know, there was a shooting a couple months ago in the little town near where you used to shoot trap. And 2 students were shot at that. And that did not make national media because that's a community that is very much pro-gun. And it wasn't made into a political thing about guns. But what they are doing is they have done a walk. Instead of a walk out, it's called a walk up. And they want to stop bullying. They want people to support one another. They said nothing about banning guns, but they had more of a vigil in support of trying to bring people together.
Exactly. And I think that they're such a tight community as is, they're from around a bigger town, but even that town is supporting them, and they're even close as a big of town they are. And the Colorado, they're right on the edge, and all the schools in Colorado that have played them or travel there all the time support them. And I think that is a huge thing, is like I've mentioned, a lot of people when they ask me about my college, is like, no one is friendly here, no one is nice, no one wants to make friends. No, if you say hi to someone, they look at you like you're insane and like you're crazy. And I think it is if people were just generally nice to each other, people just think, well, they looked at me wrong, so I have to hurt them, or they're mean to me, I have to do something about it. And even if it is just on the computer, it's will eventually blow up and be a bigger thing, just like so many movies they've done with cyberbullying and things that have happened with that. I really do think supporting each other, I really admire that school for doing that instead of automatically turning to the negative that this kid shot up the school and shot two of these students that everyone loved and cared about. They're like, we're going to support each other, and we're all going to be a community. Even if we graduate and never see each other again, we'll support you.
Yeah.
With whatever way you go, with whatever you do. We're all friends. We all have something in common. The fact that they live in the same area, go to the same school. And I just think it's really amazing. And I wish every school, every community in general would do that. And
yeah, they really are a really good example. And I think an underlying thing with that community is their families are very tight. The families, cousins, aunts, uncles, they all like support one another. The families are close. I think a lot of other parts of the country I've seen where brothers and sisters don't speak to each other, daughters don't speak to their dads because they vary in not just political differences, but they vary in opinions on other aspects, so they just don't speak to each other. And I think that's a difference. Down in that community, those families are so tight-knit. They're very close. And it's something I think the rest of the country could take example from how they love each other.
Exactly.
And I asked you about like what those kids at your school thought they were representing when they walked out, because in our little town, they had a walkout yesterday. And it was interesting to see the reasons why people thought they were walking out. Some were walking out because they thought they were paying respect to the students that were shot in Florida. Some thought they were walking out in protest to guns. But as I mentioned earlier, a store owner was just murdered the day before the walkout with a gun. Who knows if it was a legal gun or illegal? We don't know that. As I said, it's an ongoing investigation, but here we are. Wouldn't it have been good if he had a gun to defend himself? Or I don't even know, maybe he did. But that it just makes me want to carry my gun more, because there are these crazy people running around town, and we also talked about in a previous episode about an illegal immigrant that tried to kill one of our friends. Well, it's like, that makes me want to carry a gun even more. So here we are in this little community, and there are students saying we don't need guns, but there's murder and violence going on, and which leads me to think I want to carry my gun.
Exactly. And I don't know, I would really like to hear the logic, especially from a high school student, what they expect with it. Is it just, well, if there's no guns, there's no violence? Well, that crime that we talked about in previous episode, what had nothing to do with a gun, it was a knife. You watch a lot of crime shows that they use like hammers or saws, chainsaws and stuff. It's like,
yeah. So
what is the difference?
Yeah, or they're running down people with their vehicles. Like,
yeah, they run people over with their cars. What is the difference?
Crazy people will find a way to do the job. And so, yeah, it's something I'm not sure that there's an easy answer because there are such differing opinions, but it's something we definitely could take example from that little community in Aztec and see how uplifting they are and how they support one another.
Exactly. And I think in the end that really, I don't think politics matter in the end. I think it's your family, your community. If everyone was separate on their opinions, no matter what, there wouldn't be any connection because everyone has their own opinions. And I know,
Right.
like in one of my classes, they say, well, you can't have a true opinion until you graduate college. Well, and now they're saying we're going to let high school students decide our gun laws. They're going to, I think it's just a big separation when I think the key to all of this kind of settling down is everyone is a community, is helping each other, even if you don't really have anything in common. I always try to be nice to everyone I see. I say hi, I hold the door for them.
Mm-hmm.
Just a common thing. I think I grew up with that moral to be doing that, but I notice here people let the door slam in your face or you say hi, like I said, and now they look at you like you're insane.
I don't know you, you crazy person. What do you want?
Yeah, why are you saying hi to me?
And I told you, I mean, it's a different time now. I feel for you guys in your age having to grow up in this day and time. But even when I was in college, I dealt with the same thing in San Diego. Like oh, hey, how's it going? And they'll look at you like, what do you want? Are you going to mug me?
Yeah.
Like, and here I am, just a little short, little girl, like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to
I
attack
think
you.
too, it's from coming from different towns. I know our town, everyone waves at each other when you drive by, and everyone holds the door for you, and you say hi, how's it going, how's your day, to everyone, and
Yeah.
no one thinks like, why are you talking to me? What? And then you come to a bigger city, and everyone's like, we don't talk, we don't do anything that is with other random people. So I don't know. I think the small town aspect needs to become nationwide, and no matter what size town it is. And a lot of people are like,
Yeah.
we need peace and love, but they're not showing peace and love to people that don't believe the same thing they do.
Right. That's true. That is very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to tell our listeners we talk about these issues, but I would like to give them some pointers and places to go where they can learn more. As we said, we don't know what kind of training that teacher slash police person was doing in the school, but there are places where you can get good, legitimate training, and we wanted to share some of those with you so that if you're interested in learning proper gun safety and firearms, you could go take a course and learn. So one of the places, and as we mentioned, Leah is getting her shotgun instructor certification. We talked about that in our last episode if you want to head back and listen to that when this episode is done. But to find instructor courses so that you can teach other people, and I suggest those, like when I took mine, it was because I wanted to make sure I was covering all the bases. I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing details, and I wanted to relay all the information correctly to students. And I think that's partly why you want to also, Leah,
Yes.
is it?
And to start my
Yeah.
club, you have to be certified, and I'd rather be already certified and prepared. And it's just a good learning experience as well, even if I don't pursue it.
Yeah. So to go and get an NRA instructor course, you go to nrainstructors.org. And so that's instructors with an S at the end, nrainstructors.org. Another thing, talking about the police officer in the classroom or the teacher, I don't know, whatever it was. But to go and teach at school, it varies what you're going to teach depending on the ages. And as parents, what you're going to teach your kid is going to vary depending not necessarily on the year old they are, but on their responsibility and how mature the child is. But a great program, and it's free for librarians, teachers, police officers, is Eddie Eagle, and you can find that at eddieeagle.com. And Eddie Eagle teaches kids from 4 years old to, I believe, 8 years old. I may be a little off on the ages, but teaches younger kids what to do. And they actually aren't handling firearms, but they're learning what to do in the event they come across a firearm. So that's a great thing if you have young kids that you would like to make responsible. And again, we talked about young kids and guns in our last episode, if you want to go listen to that after this one. Another one that I highly recommend and I've got on my radar to go sign up for myself is one that Leah took. And that's a defensive handgun course. She took that at Gunsight Academy. Remington Arms sent her there for a youth course. And it's something where if you already know how to handle a firearm, you can get practice and you can also learn defensive skills in a simulated scenario of real life. How would you describe that, Leah?
I would say it's like real life training if you had to encounter a home invader. If you encounter a kidnapping situation, that's something we worked on. Clearing a house if there was someone in there. It's a real life scenario with even shooting if you had to. If someone was shooting back at you, they train you how to get on the ground while shooting.
Yeah, so that type of a course I think is great for a more advanced shooter. They also do have basic defensive courses for beginning shooters. And that one that she took was handgun. They also have rifle and other type of scenarios that you can do. So Gunsight is a very great organization. It's a great place in Arizona, in Paulden, Arizona. Something like that would be good to learn as well. If you aren't wanting to be an instructor, if you don't feel like you're at the caliber to teach, look for those type of courses to go take. And you can also, if you're a lady, go to the Well-Armed Woman, go to a Girl in a Gun Shooting League. If you don't even know how to shoot a gun yet, look up Shoot Like a Girl. They have a mobile virtual shooting range. They do not shoot live rounds, but you can go learn firearm safety, and then they also can direct you to a course where you can get additional training. So those are some places that you can go and learn, and each and every one of those courses we mentioned will give you the rules of firearm safety before you ever get to the range to handle a gun.
Well, that's all for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys will go shoot and get educated or even be trained to be an instructor. Stay safe out there. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to subscribe before you go, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.